Some people don't ask for help, not because they don't need it, but because something inside them stops the question before it reaches their lips. They will sit with problems for weeks, carry stress silently, figure things out the hard way, alone. And if you ask them why, they'll usually say, "I've got it." But that's not the real reason. The real reason is psychological. At some point in their life, asking for help didn't feel safe. It felt disappointing. It felt like being ignored, misunderstood, or made to feel small for needing support. So their mind learned a quiet rule: depend on yourself. It hurts less. Over time, this rule becomes an identity. They become the reliable one, the strong one, the person who handles everything. What most people don't realize is that this kind of strength often hides exhaustion. And this silence isn't confidence, it's protection. For people who rarely ask for help, this pattern doesn't begin in adulthood. It begins much earlier, often without them realizing it. There was a time when they needed support, emotionally or practically, and the response they received didn't bring relief. It brought discomfort. Maybe they were brushed aside. Maybe they were told they were overreacting. Or maybe no one responded at all. Whatever the form, the message was clear. The mind remembers outcomes, and when reaching out leads to disappointment, it doesn't analyze, it adapts. Asking for help becomes associated with rejection, with shame, with exposure that isn't protected. That's when self-reliance begins, not as strength, but as defense. At first, it feels empowering. Solving problems alone creates control. Handling stress alone feels safer than being let down again. Over time, this turns into identity. They don't see themselves as someone who can ask for help. They see themselves as someone who doesn't need to. And the world rewards this. People admire it. They call it strength. But underneath, something else is happening. This strength isn't rooted in confidence. It's rooted in prevention. If you never ask, you never risk being ignored. If you never rely on anyone, you never feel the quiet weight of unmet needs. So the mind chooses certainty over connection. And slowly, asking for help doesn't feel uncomfortable anymore. It feels unfamiliar, like a door that hasn't been opened in years. As this pattern settles in, it starts shaping how a person sees themselves. Self-reliance stops being a habit and becomes an identity. They don't just handle things alone, they expect themselves to. Needing help begins to feel like failure, not logically, but emotionally, because their sense of worth is now tied to how much they can carry without breaking. This is why asking for help feels heavier than the problem itself. It threatens the image they've built of who they are. Psychologically, identity is powerful. Once the mind decides this is who I am, anything that contradicts it creates discomfort. So the brain resists. They tell themselves they're just independent, that they work better alone, that involving others complicates things. And sometimes that's partially true, but there's another layer underneath. When you rely only on yourself, you stay in control. You decide the pace. You decide how much to reveal. Connection doesn't offer that kind of control. Relationships require exposure. They require admitting uncertainty. They require trusting someone else with a part of your inner world. For someone who learned early that support is unreliable, that level of exposure feels dangerous. So they stay composed, capable, contained. Even in close relationships, they hold something back, not intentionally, but because letting someone help means loosening the armor, and that armor once served a purpose. Over time, others may sense it. They notice this person never asks for anything, never leans, never admits they're struggling. And without meaning to, this creates emotional distance, not because they don't care, but because they've learned to survive without depending. This is how strength slowly turns into separation, and why people who rarely ask for help often feel understood, but never fully known. Over time, this way of living starts to affect relationships, because when someone never asks for help, others assume they don't need it, so people stop checking in, not out of neglect, but out of respect for the strength they see. The more independent they appear, the less support they receive, and the less support they receive, the more convinced they become that relying on others isn't an option. In close relationships, they become the safe place for others, while keeping their own struggles carefully out of view. There's often a quiet fear beneath this, the fear of becoming a burden, the fear of being too much. So they ration vulnerability. They share small things, safe things, but never the weight they actually carry. Over time, this creates a strange kind of loneliness. They're surrounded by people, yet there's a sense of being emotionally unseen. Because connection doesn't come from being needed, it comes from being known. And when someone never allows themselves to need, others never get the chance to truly know them. This is why people who rarely ask for help often feel exhausted. They're always present, always supportive, but rarely held. And eventually, this imbalance takes a toll. Tension becomes baseline. Stress feels familiar. Exhaustion gets misunderstood as maturity. They don't collapse dramatically. They just become quieter, more distant. And beneath all of this is a quiet grief, the grief of not being taken care of the way you take care of others. For people who rarely ask for help, the hardest part isn't learning how to speak up. It's realizing that needing support doesn't erase who you are. True safety isn't built through isolation, it's built through repair, through moments where you risk being seen. Asking for help isn't about becoming dependent, it's about allowing balance. What often goes unrecognized is this: the ability to ask for help doesn't come from weakness, it comes from self-trust. Trust that your needs are valid. Trust that being supported doesn't make you less capable. Trust that you don't have to earn care by suffering quietly. It happens slowly, in small moments, a sentence spoken instead of swallowed, a weight shared instead of hidden. And each time that happens, the mind learns a new rule. Not everyone will ignore you. Not every need will be dismissed. Because strength was never about how much you could endure alone. It was about how honestly you could show up. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't holding everything together. It's finally allowing someone else to help you carry it.